arrival is of departure, those soldiers.
All right, so a lot of people have asked about this one, and there isn't a ton about it on YouTube or anywhere, so I thought I'd cover the Yamaha CS30 first thing, since I haven't reviewed a synth in a while. So this is a 1977 Yamaha CS30. It was released as a mono synth. Mine is modified so it could be played duophonically, but we'll get into that later. But it's one of the strangest setup synthesizers I've ever seen. So that's why I got this sort of close up on the synth and not on me, so I can try to point out how weird this thing is. All right, so on this side, way over here, we got the tune, the detune for VCO1, and then you could also have the tuning controlled by any of 5 EGs. We'll get into what the 5 envelope generators are later. Here's a knob for how much it's affected. Then you got VCO1, starts out pretty simple and normal. It can be triggered by the sequencer or the keyboard. The octave range goes all the way down to 64 foot and all the way up to 2 foot. So you got a huge range. You got pulse width modulation. You also have cross mod from VCO2 and LFO amount. And the LFO can be 5 different shapes. Yamaha and Octave, that made the Octave Cat, and a couple other people were really smart, where they did this thing where the LFO can be different shapes at different spots, like your filter or your amp or whatever, instead of just, you pick a sine wave and you're stuck with an LFO sine wave everywhere, like Moog and ARP did, I think. Moog definitely did. But anyways, so you got 5 different LFO shapes, and you also have external. Now, there's an external input in this synth that can be used and as an audio source, like you usually do, run it through the filters. But in this synthesizer, you can also use it as a modulation source, which is very strange. I've dabbled with that a little bit, but not too much. So that's the first oscillator. Right next to it, you got another oscillator that goes all the way down to 128 foot and up to 4 feet. So down to clicks. Again, it can be triggered with the sequencer or the keyboard. Pulse width modulation, the same 5 LFO shapes to choose from, and the external. No cross mod on oscillator 2. What you'll notice is no option for the oscillator's waveform. And when you first sit down at this, you're like, well, what the heck? And then you find you can choose in the filter section for some reason. And that's how this whole synthesizer is. You're missing something, and then it's down the road somewhere else. So now you get to the filters. Again, there's 2 full filters. Filter 1, your choices are, you can have sawtooth. You have 2 inputs. And for input 1, you could have sawtooth from oscillator 1 or the square wave from oscillator 1 or a sawtooth from oscillator 2. And on the second input, you can have sawtooth from oscillator 2 or noise or an external source. Why you can't have a square wave from oscillator 2 or sine waves or anything else, I don't know. I don't know who picked these. I think they should have had one of these 6 section knobs and had more options, and it would have been really cool. But you'll see this down the road as well. They have really strange options. So that's what you get for oscillator 1. So obviously you're going to pick, or filter 1. So obviously you're going to pick something from oscillator 1 in this input, because why would you want the same oscillator going through both? I don't know. Then you got cutoff, resonance, keyboard follow, mod depth from the LFO. Again, 5 LFO shapes are external. And envelope depth which again, the 5 envelop options. And next to it, filter 2. This time your options are square wave from oscillator 2. Okay, that's good. Sawtooth from oscillator 2. And then for some reason, filter 1 as a high pass filter. Really weird choice. I tried playing around with it. I don't know why you would want that. But yeah, that's what they decided to put there. Very weird. And there's only one input on filter 2. So obviously you're probably going to use one of the oscillator choices. Again, cutoff, resonance, keyboard follow, mod from the LFO. Same choices there. Same choices for envelop generation, modulation. Again, okay, so what kind of filter is it? Are they low pass filters? Well, you have to pick that down the road in the amp sections. Again, 2 full amps. Amp 1, you get to pick what filter 1 is, a low pass, band pass, or a high pass. Why it's there, I don't know, because both filters go through this amp. Yet you don't decide what filter 2 is over here. You decide that down the road again. Okay. But anyways, so you can pick what kind of filter that is over here. You got your mixer. So you got filter 1, filter 2. You also have a sine wave for oscillator 1, which really finally gives it some oomph, some bottom end. I pretty much always have that turned up. And then again, your modulation from the LFO, whatever waveform, and the weird external thing. The amp can be triggered from one of the envelope generators or just be set to hold. This time you only have 3 options. We'll get to the weird options in a little bit. And then amp 2, here it is. You can finally pick what kind of filter 2 is. Again, it can be a high pass, band pass, or low pass. Same envelope choices. This one you got no mixer. And you just have modulation choices. And then this normal to ring mod, and the ring modulator can come from the LFO or VCO1. So this amp is kind of, usually you just use it, I use it to just get some more weirdness going in it. But you can do normal things. Like if you wanna, you could totally have the amps be stereo and have one filter in each, set them to the same filter. But yeah, and you got this trigger. It could be triggered from the LFO or normal keyboard, single or multi. Up here's a 8-track sequencer, step sequencer. That's got its own clock speed. It doesn't run on the LFO clock, so that's great. It could run from the clock or manually. Some weird choices, but and then down here, you got 3 full envelope generators. All of them can be triggered from either the keyboard or the sequencer or an external source. And all 3 of them can be normal time or 5 times longer. And the first 2 can either be regular or inverted. So that's why the 3 envelope generators give you 5 options. Not sure why the third one can't be inverted, but again, the weird random choices in this thing. Also, the first envelope generator is very strange. It's not a regular attack, decay, sustain, release. It's a initial level, attack time, decay time, release time. So it just seems a lot stranger. Basically, I always have one of these being triggered by the sequencer, which then just gives me a second LFO, which with whatever shape I want to make. So that's a great option. Down here you got your standard LFO speed, and it can be affected by any of the envelope generators, all 5 choices, and how much. So you can get some crazy stuff going there. Portamento, pitch bend, how much you want it, and then trigger level and signal level for your external input. So yeah, like I said, mine's modded through the CV jacks. I got extra CV and gate jacks back there, so I can play it duophonically with a MIDI keyboard. And it's great. Unfortunately, in doing that, the whole tuning section and detuning no longer works. So I guess that must directly be connected to the keyboard. And same thing, I don't think the portamento works through the CV gate jacks or your trigger options over here. That stuff all seems to be dead when using the MIDI keyboard, but I could play 2 notes. Also, you have a balance knob over here for your 2 amps, 2 outputs, because there's either a mix output on the back or 2 different ones. So yeah, very bizarre. But you can make really crazy sounds. It sounds very different to the CS40 to me. It's got a thin, weird, bubbly, liquidy kind of sound. It would be really thin if it wasn't for this one sub oscillator. That kind of beefs it up some. Really good for bizarre alien sounds. Not your typical Moog ARP Odyssey kind of thing at all, and even very different from the CS40. So yeah, I did a few patches. Let's check it out.